1:00, so I'm going to get started on time. Super happy to welcome Daniel today. I'm going to attempt to pronounce his surname Oesterreich.
Yeah, quite.
Does that mean you're from Austria?
It's
just a coincidence?
It's just a coincidence. It means Austria, but I'm from Germany.
Okay,
so, yeah.
Cool. Daniel's been popping in and out over the last few weeks, and it's always cool to have people from abroad share their experience with us. So I'm going to let Daniel get started, but I'm going to ask Daniel at the beginning just to tell us how you've ended up in JBay, give us some context on that, and then we'll have the usual session and some Q&A afterwards, like always.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Glad to see some familiar faces, some new faces. My name is Daniel. I'm from Germany. I'm kind of on a holiday here because JBay feels like a second home almost. I stayed here in 2016 for about a year, and I came here initially to do the Christian Surfers leadership training. So I stayed with the Christian Surfers, and Henke was part of our group back then. And during that year, on a trip actually that we did with the Christian Surfers to Cape Town and the Western Cape, we attended a session that was given by A21, which is also an organization that fights human trafficking. And so it was basically a talk like the one that you are attending right now. And I was sitting in one of those chairs. And something in that talk really struck me. And I just was so moved by it that the topic wouldn't, it just got hold of me since then. And going back to Germany then in 2017, I just tried to find an organization that has the same mission as A21 does, and that's how I ended up with IJM. It's an abbreviation for the International Justice Mission, which also fights human trafficking and modern-day slavery. So you might have seen on the poster that the question for today was, can we end slavery in our lifetime? And of course, standing here as a representative from IJM, I say yes, we can. We can end slavery because it's happening very systematically and in a very broad scale in our world still. We might not be able to end slavery in each and every individual case because there are just human beings that are quite evil, and so there will always be violence and there will always be crime. But we can fight slavery on a broad scale that's happening systematically. So maybe the question for today is rather, how can we end it? And I'm very thankful to give you some insight into the topic and how we approach it as an organization. To start with, I brought you some figures, and the first one is that one that 6 years ago now was the one that really hit me, namely that there are about 40 million people at the moment that are trapped in slavery. I just looked up before how many inhabitants there are in South Africa. It's about 59 million, so that's like 2/3 of the civilization in South Africa, which is just a massive number. So, you kind of knew about people being exploited in factories in Southeast Asia, or a lot of us have heard about what's happened to the workers in Qatar that had to build the stadiums, that there was modern-day slavery taking place there. But somehow I also never thought that it's up to the millions. And that figure is that horrific when you look, or it becomes more horrific when you look at what slavery actually means. The United Nations define it as the exploitation of a person against their will by another person by various means, such as threats of violence, deception, and fraud or abuse. So these 40 million people are not people that cannot take their annual leave whenever they want, or that are not paid, that don't get the minimum wage, or something like that, or that don't get covered by their insurance when they are ill, which is also very bad stuff in itself. But those 40 million people are actually at the very end of the spectrum of exploitation. So they are kept in a space against their will, they are exploited, and they cannot just leave that situation. If they want to, they experience violence and abuse. And that's what's, for me, that's so terrible about it, that it's 40 million people that don't have any freedom, that their dignity is taken away, and they're not in a position where they can actually change in the situation they are in by themselves. And before we also get to know an individual case, how that might look like, just brought you some more figures, and now I'll ask you, you can have a guess what you think these 4 figures might stand for. We can start from the left, but you can also choose another one if you would like to. Like in school.
I think the next one is the cost to buy someone, and the third one is the average age.
Okay, yeah. 2 correct answers already. Yeah. So 80 euros, that's the average cost of a person nowadays, which is really not a lot. It's nothing, basically. And that is also why modern day slavery is so attractive for criminals, because it's very cheap to buy a person, basically, and then to exploit them. And other than selling weapons or drugs, in human trafficking, once you've acquired a person for yourself, you can exploit them over and over again. So from a financial view, for criminals, human trafficking is very attractive. That's why it has overtaken weapon trade, that organized crime. And experts think that it might also overtake the drug trade in the world and will become the most financially profitable organized crime in the world. 11, it represents 2 numbers. It's the average age. When you look at children being sexually exploited in the Philippines, which is also a horrific number. So it is mostly, especially in the Philippines, it's mostly children that are sexually exploited. And it's also a number representing something in India. Namely, in India there are 11 judges per 1 million inhabitants. In Germany, to have a comparison, there are 250 judges for 1 million inhabitants. Which is already one problem in human trafficking, is that legal systems don't work properly. But we'll get to that a bit later. 25%? Any idea? Okay, I have to watch the time a little bit. 25% is a bit linked to 11, and that's the amount of children of those 40 million. So about 10 million children are kept in slavery at the moment. And 73% that refers to the females. So it's an issue that it's mainly women and girls that are trapped in slavery. Slavery obviously is our core mission to fight it as our organization. which we do in several countries all over the world. But we also address violence against women and children, which can be sexual abuse or domestic violence in a couple of countries. And over the last couple of years, we also started to engage in fighting the police abuse of power in Africa. So it's all cases where there's a lot of violence, and it's very often, or in most cases, it's people coming from poverty that have to experience that violence. Those are the countries where we operate. Don't want to give you a rundown of each and every country. What I just think is very telling about that map is that it's a global issue. It's a global problem. So you cannot reduce human trafficking to Southeast Asia or Central Africa. It's happening everywhere. That's why we also work in Europe. Most recently started to work in Romania. And it is happening everywhere. So because there are always people that want to exploit other people, and they always find someone who is in poverty and who is in need and is vulnerable for that exploitation. The organization was founded by a lawyer from the United States, which also explains the very legal approach that we have. It's now in over 20 countries where we operate. And something that I found very appealing when I got to know IJM and how they work is that it's really 95% of our employees must be locals. So it's not like we don't send Europeans or Northern American teams into African countries, for example, to improve the situation. It's only like some single people going there, starting the work and trying to find people within the countries that also have a heart for those people in slavery, and then that want to change the system. Because only that's like the only sustainable way, if the people from the countries itself actually try to fight it. Yeah? And we just try to initiate it. Yes. Okay, you've heard some numbers, you saw a map, and now I brought you a short video clip. It's about Foley. He's a boy, and he was trapped in slavery in the context of the fishing industry on Lake Volta in Ghana. And it's just, he has been freed, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't show his story in this video. But it's just a good insight into how that might look like in an individual case.
I am 5 years old. I follow grandfather to the farm and watch what he's doing. I am 9 years old. I never want to leave this place. I always help my grandfather in the market.
Akpere mu adagbare ji o. Never no gbanyan akpoji na o.
Aboboruku asagbare bevi.
Esia.
When I left home with my uncle, I didn't see my grandparents anymore.
So vai in na school. Astronomy.
The first time I went on the lake, I wanted to escape, but I didn't know the way.
Get it, Chairman!
God, when the waves crash on the water, gave me strength. And the net holds me in the water, gave me breath. God, do I let the net go into the deep place? Give me a life today. They told me my grandfather came for me, but he could not find me. My uncle said, "You forget about your grandfather." And he said, "Those are the people who comes for small boys."
Oli, one get him. Oli, what would I see him?
So when they come, I should jump into the water and swim away.
Oli!
Ancora? Vai, ancora. Ancora. Ancora.
Non connaît Oli.
Okay, so that was Foley's story. It had a happy ending, luckily. But what is very interesting to see in that case is that it was his uncle who brought him into that situation. And that's actually the majority of cases. So you might have seen the movie Taken. And that's often like when you tell people that there are still people being exploited and being taken into slavery. That's how they imagine it. They're like there's a black van pulling up and you get pulled into it and then they take you away. But that's not how it usually works. In the majority of cases, it's relatives or friends of the relatives that have access to the people and that actually start the process of them getting into slavery. So, as you saw on the lake, Foley was rescued, and freeing people is obviously the first step in our approach to fight human trafficking. Here we always work in cooperation with local authorities. So again, it's not like there's a American IJM SWAT team that just goes into the brothels and rescues people. We always do it with the police in the countries together. And with partners, we take care of the aftercare, so that at least for 2 years, aftercare is guaranteed for the people rescued from slavery. Another very important aspect of fighting modern slavery is to prosecute the perpetrators. On the one hand, it keeps victims safe, and on the other hand, it has a deterring effect. So in a lot of countries where we started our work, the laws that were set in place or how the courts were working, people haven't been accused for what their crimes at all, or if they have been, they only got sentenced for like a couple of weeks in prison, or maybe even just like a financial penalty. And of course, that doesn't keep human traffickers from what they're doing if they're just free to go again a couple of weeks later. So yeah, really helping the countries and the courts in the prosecution is another very important step. But then there's a third step, and there's a quote by another German, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who gave this quote in the context of World War II and the Holocaust. He said, we are not to simply bandage the wounds of the victims beneath the wheels of injustice. We are to drive a spoke into the wheel itself. But it also really applies for our work, because only freeing people and helping in the prosecution wouldn't prevent human trafficking from happening on a long-term basis. So as I said before, it was founded by a lawyer, so it has a very legal approach, and we really try over time to assess in the countries that we work, like where are problems in the legal system, and where are gaps that we can help to close. That might be, as in India, that the number of judges is just too low. Might be that in law training for judges and prosecutors, human trafficking is not really part of the curriculum. Could be that there's corruption which needs to be fought. Could be just the equipment of the police, basically, that they're not equipped to go and find people and to rescue them. So there's a lot of gear wheels that take into each other in the legal system. And we really try to find gaps and to improve it and to really have a sustainable change. And often, we have to reassess, like taking the Philippines as an example. There, we started our work very early to help, especially to end the sexual exploitation of children in the red light districts. Then COVID came along, and everything most of the achievements that had been made, kind of became undone. Because now people started to exploit the children online. So exploiting the children in their homes, actually filming it, streaming it, and then other people can download it and watch it, which is a whole nother level of the exploitation. So we were kind of finished in the Philippines, as in we only were partners, but the government was fine with how they addressed the problem of sexual exploitation in the country. Now we have to work there more again because of that online exploitation. Okay, so we are almost at the end of the talk. And you've heard some figures. You got to know an individual case. You heard how we as an organization try to approach the problem. But now, of course, the question is, what can you guys do now that you've listened to it? William Wilberforce, who played a big role in abolishing slavery back in the 18th century, once said, "You may choose to look the other way, but you can never again say you did not know." So now you've attended this talk and you know a lot more, hopefully, about what is happening, how people are exploited and treated. And it's your choice now. And first of all, I want to say it is okay to a certain extent to look another way. Because there's just so much stuff going on, so much horrible developments at the moment. We've been living in a pandemic for 2.5 years. A war in Europe broke out that makes all the prices skyrocketing. We see the effects of climate change more and more. So if you say, well, I cannot burden myself with another topic like that at the moment, that's really fine. Maybe in a couple of years' time, you have more capacity and to maybe deal with it, and then you remember sitting in the green room. But if you feel like, okay, that's a topic I want to get involved in fighting that, most important thing is to stay informed and to spread the word, to raise awareness. So now I would briefly like to ask you to get your phones and scan the QR code, which will just take you to our international website. And then you can maybe later this afternoon you can just read a bit more. There's a lot of resources on there. Of course, there's a newsletter which you can sign up for. It's only sent out every fortnight, so it's not too much spam. Yeah, but that's just important because a lot of people don't know about slavery happening as it is, and that there are ways how we can get involved. If you want to volunteer with A21, for example, in South Africa, if you, want to be more aware of where you buy your clothes, for example, like where can I buy fair products? Or if you just feel like, okay, I can donate like a small amount monthly. It doesn't matter however you want to get involved. Just stay informed and talk about it. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, so all the social media platforms as well. And that's about it from my side. Yeah, it's actually an interesting comparison because that's what you all sometimes like hear people also saying that if you're trapped in slavery, you are treated like an animal because that's actually what happens. You live in a space where you can't escape, and I'm sure if you apply that to cattle farms or whatever, you might also say those animals are up also there, maybe against their will, and are exploited. It's definitely not my area of expertise, and I'm grateful there are other organizations that fight that fight because there are animal rights. Obviously, so there are human rights, there are also animal rights, and so we should consider that more. I agree with you. Yeah. Also a good question. I mean, for me now, it's often quite easy because I actually now, when I go back to Germany, will start a full-time job with IJM. So very often people just ask me what I do for a living. We get into the topic. Now for you, if you're very ambitious, of course, you could arrange stuff like that. So there are those so-called A-teams from A21. Which they start like events to raise awareness, but maybe more on an everyday kind of level. I think it's really, just see in the relations that you have and the discussions that you have, there might be some topics where you can bring up that issue. I wouldn't. wouldn't just go out on the street and start talk about it because that takes people off guard somehow. But it's easiest to just start with your close friends and family, and maybe just telling them, "Hey, I was at the green room and there was a talk about IJM, and so have you heard about that?" So. Oh, it creates a lot of things. If it creates just more awareness in it, and also then having a look into how politics address it. Because obviously we need governments in our world to also be aware of that issue. And in Germany, like more and more people also ask politicians and the parties, so what is your stance on human trafficking in Europe? Because it's happening here as well, and then maybe even see how it affects who you vote for, or if you have access to somebody who's in education that can take up the topic and bring it into schools. Because I mean, here in South Africa, maybe more than in other countries, you have a huge population that lives in extreme poverty and who are the most vulnerable to actually get into situations like that. So I think there's just like a ripple effect. If more people talk about it, more people hear about it, and eventually also people that are in influential positions or that have a very broad audience can talk about it. And it might also create resources, of course, in donations, for example, for organizations like us, so A21, that really have their expertise in fighting it. Hope that answers the question. Yeah. So we always make sure there is aftercare in safe houses or social institutions. So otherwise we wouldn't start our work and start rescuing people. Children can be tricky, of course, because if you take Foley's example, he was trafficked by his uncle, and then he was rescued, and he's still underage, so he can and he should go back to his family. And there are cases where they go back into their families and are assisted by social workers and psychologists there. It's just in every individual case, we have to assess the risk, especially. So, is it safe for the kid to go back into that environment, or do we actually have to keep them out of there? Which is not always easy legally, but yeah. So first question is, it's around $150 billion, which is the combined income of, I think, McDonald's, Apple, and Microsoft. So it's huge. And as I said, it's only organized crime in drugs that creates more income globally. I myself have not felt unsafe. Because the work that I do in raising awareness, and I'm in Germany. I'll start working in the major donor department. It's not linked to any rescuing or whatever. So it's my colleagues that do the work somewhere else that. For them, it can be very unsafe. And we had employees actually also being killed. So just a couple of years ago, one of our lawyers had been assassinated during a court case. So it is, there's like organized crime behind it. So it can be unsafe, but not for me so far. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think I'll probably draw the line there. You've answered my question
in
response to Lina.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Daniel, for coming here today and sharing this with us. Until the next Off the Lips. Take care, everyone. We'll see you again soon. Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you very much.